Welcome back. As we dive into Porter's Five Forces, if you have a lot of undergraduate business education, there may be a temptation for you to go, "Oh, I'm all over this. I understand Porter's Five Forces." I'm going to beg to differ with you a little bit. Most people read it and don't really understand it, but it's pivotal. I really believe that Porter's Five Forces is one of the most useful tools at a strategist's disposal to try to make sense of the world and understand how to respond to it. That's why I put in Michael Porter's updated 2008 Porter's Five Forces articles as one of your reading. So the textbooks the textbook is excellent, has an excellent discussion, but the Porter's article is an updated version, has fresher examples in it, and frankly, he's arguing with some of the people who've criticized his model in the past. So you're going to get the most dramatic discussion. So I really want you to read it and understand it. But let's talk about it. Let me try to bring out some highlights that you might not get from the book that I think are key. The first is, I believe the Porter's Five Forces are a story of power and profitability. Power comes in because you're going to see a lot of this analysis is who needs whom worse. And profitability because what this is saying is, this is my industry profits. Who gets to keep this money? When I say industry, I mean the bigger picture. And I should have said earlier, we're now moving in one circle. We're moving away from the general environment into the industry analysis. I apologize for not getting that out up front. So these bills represent my industry profit. As I have to worry about new entrants, I tend to spend money to improve service, cut my prices, or improve my product, and I lose a little bit of my profit. And then as I have very powerful suppliers, they figure out a way to charge me more money, and there goes another one of my dollars. And if I deal with very powerful buyers, they're very smart about extracting product upgrades or lower prices, and there goes another one of my dollars. And then I have to worry a lot about substitute products, which is that somebody that's not in my industry, but maybe starting to poach my customers, and I need to do something to keep them away. And then lastly, this $5 bill. It's incorrect to say that the rivalry among competitors is always the most powerful force. It often is, and it's the one where you're going to see the most trading going on. So I left a $5 bill. And if I get into an intensely competitive industry, then what? I've got no profit. And so that's what Porter's Five Forces is about. I want you to read the article. So what I'm going to try to do is bring up some of the nuances and point out to you ways that companies wicker with these things. The first several bullets on this chart are well talked about in the handout or the reading, so I'm not going to talk about that. Distribution channels. This is key. You have to think about how easy is it going to be for somebody to break in. Someone once joked that the most expensive real estate in the entire world is shelf space in a retailer, because retailers only put products on their shelves that they're convinced are going to or sell adequately, and that's really true. So getting access onto retail shelf space is critical. So is this a product that's sold largely on the internet, which is to say not as difficult, although you still have to get to a highly ranked website to have it available, as opposed to something where you have to be on a retailer shelf. Let me give you another example of a kind of a weird one. Several years ago in IDWF, one of our winners was a custom casket maker. I know, kind of icky, but he built a beautiful casket. The challenge he ran into is, not surprisingly, where are the majority of caskets sold? By funeral homes. Now, in Texas especially, you don't have to use one. You can bring your own casket. And believe it or not, there was a period where Walmart was selling caskets via the internet. But the reality is there is a company called Batesville that has 40% of the market share in caskets in the United States. And they do so by things like going to funeral homes and saying, if you don't sell, if we constitute X% of your business for the year, your staff will get a vacation to Hawaii. And so that gentleman selling these beautiful caskets never really took off because he could never get into the funeral homes because they were somewhat captive to the demands of Batesville and potentially another large one or two manufacturers, but really it's mainly Batesville. So that they feel pretty good about where they are because they've got the market share locked down. Although social cultural change in the casket business, more and more people opting for cremation means less caskets sold. Government policy. This is one where you see businesses really try to wicker with this. For example, I had a niece in Tennessee several years ago that earned her license to be a hairstylist. Took her a year and a half of almost full-time training to get that hairstylist degree. Do I think that all that year and a half was justified? No. They do say, well, chemicals, dyeing hair are important, blah, 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 blah. Fair enough. I teach people to fly in well under a year, and I think flying is a lot more involved than that. But if we go back and look at the licensing requirements, who probably lobbied the Tennessee state legislature to put in those very strict licensing requirements? Beautician schools and existing haircutters. Why? The more haircutters they keep out of the market, the higher rates they're able to charge. And so companies will try to erect barriers to entry through governmental channels so that it's harder for people to come in. And then lastly is this idea of low switching costs. Let me tell you, switching costs are all around you. And really good companies try to erect them in very clever ways that will cement your loyalty. Let me give you some examples of, well, let me give you first an unsubtle one. All these frequent flyer rewards programs, get 5 stamps and get a free meal, kickback if you use the company credit card. All of those are very direct, unsubtle forms of switching costs. They're trying to make sure you use their product because you have some sort of a rewards program. But there are some more very subtle types of switching costs that companies intentionally try to erect. One would be a proprietary software design or proprietary product design, where you can only buy a replacement element or a reusable by coming back to them, so that it costs you, you're going to continue to buy the renewables, the commodities, because to use a competitor's commodity, you have to go buy the big system. Software propriety, maintaining control over the data such that you lose that if you switch to another product, we don't transfer your data with you, or we make it very difficult to convert the data. Amazon Prime. Any Amazon Prime customers out there? Think about how, if you're an Amazon Prime customer, what do? Do you look anywhere other than Amazon? Many of you don't, and I kind of fall into that boat. And so they're trying to induce the switching cost so that you mentally go, oh, I've already paid for that free shipping with Amazon through Amazon Prime, trying to steer more of the purchases back onto the platform. So switching costs are all around you, and companies try to find ways to make it hard for people to switch so that they can increase their profitability. Next is this idea of the buyer and the supplier, and I'm just going to forward onto that slide to show you that one and then go back, because the concepts are very similar. It kind of boils down to 3 things. Who needs who worse? And that is, do you really need the product attributes? Does a supplier have something you really need? Does a buyer have something you really need? How could a buyer have something you really need? Maybe that's a very high prestige buyer. And by getting them to be your buyer or the user of your product, you get a lot of other legitimacy benefits. For example, the official supplier of fill in the blank. That would be an example of a powerful buyer. So who needs who worse is first. Second is related to it, and it's the idea of concentration. If I have many suppliers trying to sell to a few buyers, obviously those buyers have some power over the suppliers because, hey, there's a lot of them out there. Flip that around. If I only have 1 or 2 suppliers, but many people that need their product, then obviously they're going to have power. So that tends to work. Those I'm sorry, I'm having a brain stall. So it tends to be power, and then concentration, and then just a little bit of this idea of integration. We're going to talk more about this when we talk about vertical integration, but the idea, could the supplier come forward and enter the buyer's business, or could the buyer move backwards and enter the supplier's business? So an example of this would be when Microsoft, who tended to make operating systems, decided to build the Surface itself. This was a backward integration where a buyer of hardware, or I'm sorry, where a supplier of software to make hardware devices work, that would be computers and cell phones and the like, decided to enter the hardware business. So it was an idea of integrating forward. And sometimes buyers do the same thing, they integrate backwards. So I know I haven't been always very clear on this, but it's who needs who worse, the idea of concentration, and then can they forward or backward integrate. On the next video, I'm going to tell you a story about buyers and suppliers that hopefully will give you a sense of nuance about this. Join me then.